are all wired for addiction. Dopamine is a chemical in our brains that makes us crave any enjoyable activity. Social media, fast food, alcohol, video games, mindless shopping, gambling, the list goes on and on. You might not be a crackhead begging for $1 on the street, but almost every single one of us is addicted to something, even those who don't want to admit it. But the question is, how is that impacting us? Could something as simple as scrolling through your social media feed, or constantly playing video games, or listening to music 24/7 be making your life worse? Well, the science is in, and it shows that our mental health is being destroyed by constant, easy dopamine spikes. Leading neuroscientists say that it's lowering our ability to feel enjoyment from the small things in life, ruining our focus, sabotaging our relationships, and leaving a void deep down within us. I personally did a dopamine detox in my own life recently, and it has been one of the best things for just finding deeper meaning in my own life and getting away from all the mindless distractions. In this video, we are going to break down what a dopamine detox is and what the science says about it, using studies and quotes from some of today's leading neuroscientists, books, and research journals. By the end of this video, you will have a proven roadmap for how to become happier, healthier, build better focus, and design an all-around more meaningful life through the help of a dopamine detox. All of the sources and scientific references are shown in the description, but my main point with this video is very simple. Life can be absolutely beautiful, but oftentimes we're just distracting ourselves too much to see that. Dopamine detoxing is a very powerful tool for overcoming that, and I just wanted to share the broken down, very simple science so that anyone can apply it to their own life. Anyways, let's get right on into the video. What up, YouTube? So on this video, we are going to do one of the deepest dives I have done on this channel by far. And this is honestly one of the most important topics that I've covered thus far on this channel because, so today we're going to be talking about dopamine, how it impacts your body, your mental health, your happiness, your focus, your motivation, every aspect of your life. And beyond that, we're going to be talking about what a dopamine detox is and how it has been scientifically proven to help with so many different aspects of life, whether you have depression, whether you have constant tiredness and lethargy, whether you feel no motivation, whether you feel like you don't have friendships in your life. Doing dopamine detox can really help with so many different aspects of that. So, like I said, today we're going to be doing a very deep dive into dopamine and dopamine detoxing. Everything in this video is completely based on research from scientific journals and publications. We take quotes from some of the leading neuroscientists of today, like Andrew Huberman, Dr. Anna Lemke, and other Stanford neuroscientists. So again, everything is completely science-based, but I have attempted to make everything as simplified and basic as possible so that anyone watching can understand as quickly as possible. I've attached all of the sources down below in the description, so if you want to do further research and make your own conclusions, that is entirely your prerogative. But anyways, let's dive right on into the video. So number one, what is dopamine? This is going to be the first part of the video. This is a 5-part video series. All of it is within the same video to make it as simple and easy as possible, but it has 5 different parts. But anyways, what is dopamine? What you need to realize is that dopamine is a neurotransmitter within the brain that controls pleasure and craving. And what I mean by that is that it is simply a chemical within your brain. And whenever you have a desire to do something, that is dopamine in action. If you want to play a video game Or if you're playing a video game and you have that desire to keep on playing, that is dopamine causing that. If you eat some food and you feel that sense of pleasure, that is dopamine. When you have sex and you feel that pleasure, that's dopamine. When you play video games and you have that drive to keep on going, that is dopamine. No matter what the activity is, when you have that drive to keep on pursuing more of the activity, that is dopamine in action. Now, what you need to realize is that different activities cause different levels of dopamine spikes within your brain. So at any point in time, our brain is constantly releasing a baseline level of dopamine. So for example, let's say that your baseline level of dopamine is just 1 dopamine unit. That's not how it works, but that's a simplified version of it. So let's say that you're typically releasing 1 dopamine unit at any point in time. Over time, when you have different activities, they can spike your dopamine levels to different levels. So let's move to the next slide. So for example, when you have some chocolate, that causes about a 50% increase in your baseline dopamine levels. So that might look like you go from 1 unit to 1.5 units. When you have sex, that's about a 100% increase. When you play video games, also a 100% increase, more or less. When you do drugs like meth, that causes about a 1000% increase in your dopamine levels. So again, when you do these things, you have a baseline level, but your dopamine levels spike up to these extreme levels when you do these different activities. And excuse me. And again, since dopamine controls your pleasure, when you do these different activities and your dopamine spikes to these extreme levels, you feel extremely pleasurable. So when you have some chocolate, since it's only a 50% increase, you feel slightly pleasurable. But when you have sex, since it's a 100% increase, you feel very pleasurable. When you play video games, you feel very pleasurable. When you take meth, you feel extremely pleasurable because it's a 1000% increase in your dopamine levels, in your pleasure levels. And again, the sources are down below in the description. And this is just a study that shows some of the dopamine levels induced by different activities. But let's move on to part 2 of the video. And that is, why is dopamine a bad thing? And is it a bad thing? Because if dopamine causes pleasure, and feeling pleasure is obviously not a bad thing, how can too much dopamine be a bad thing, right? Well, the answer is a little bit complicated, but dopamine is not a bad thing. It truly isn't. Everything in life releases dopamine. It is a completely natural chemical within the body. Whether you are laying down in bed or reading a book or just simply standing somewhere doing absolutely nothing, dopamine is still being released all the time at a baseline level. It never stops. So when you see people saying that dopamine is a bad thing, that is a completely false narrative, because you can't say that something that naturally occurs in our body is a bad thing. That's not the case. But it becomes problematic when you are constantly spiking your dopamine to these extreme levels, because our bodies are not made to have spike after spike after spike after spike. And what the neuroscience has shown is that when we constantly spike our dopamine levels to these extreme heights from extreme activities, that causes us to feel shitty on a day-to-day basis. So what that might look like is, if you're constantly playing video games or constantly watching pornography or constantly smoking and taking nicotine and vaping and constantly partying, all of these different activities, they're not bad in moderation, but when they become the constant thing in your life, that causes your dopamine levels to become just erratic. And that causes a lowering of your baseline level of happiness and enjoyment in day-to-day life. And again, the science completely shows this. The sources are down below. You can do your own research, but let's move on to the next. And again, so Dr. Anna Lemke, she's a leading neuroscientist at Stanford University. She's been a psychiatrist for over 25 years, has worked with hundreds of patients, and she wrote a book called Dopamine Nation. But one of the things that she said is that if we expose ourselves chronically to substances or behaviors that repeatedly release large amounts of dopamine in our brain's reward pathway, then we can change our baseline and lower it over time as our brain tries to compensate for all that dopamine, which really is more than we were designed to experience. So even when you're not doing that activity, you are in a dopamine deficit state, which is akin to a clinical depression. You have anxiety, irritability, insomnia, dysphoria. It can really reset our dopamine threshold, and then nothing is enjoyable. So that kind of paints the baseline of what the science says about how constant dopamine spikes can really destroy our mental health. So again, why? So we've kind of explained the simple fact that dopamine spiking constantly lowers your baseline dopamine levels and makes you unhappy. But why is that? Like, what is the scientific mechanisms behind that? So to keep it very simple, after you have a dopamine spike to an extreme level, you don't go back to your baseline level afterwards. You go below baseline. So for example, let's say that your baseline level of dopamine, just for example purposes, let's say that your baseline level is 1 dopamine unit. And that after you do, let's say you do some drugs, or you go to a party. You go to a party and have sex with a random chick. So you go from one dopamine unit at your baseline, and then you spike up to 2 dopamine units for the experience of that moment. But afterwards, you don't go back to your baseline of 1. You might go back to below 1, to like 0.5 dopamine units. And when that happens, because dopamine is in charge of your body feeling pleasure and just feeling okay, when you go below your baseline, now you feel shitty. Now you feel terrible. And even though you feel terrible, the issue is that now you also feel craving for that activity, because whenever some activity releases dopamine in our body, although we feel worse afterwards, there's a certain balance within our body that tells us to continue pursuing dopamine-rich activities. So whenever you have sex or watch pornography or play video games or hop on social media or do anything like that, our bodies tell us that we need more of the activity. It's a very dangerous hamster wheel, because even though constant use of these activities causes our brain's chemistry to just be completely thrown off and for us to feel unhappy long term, our bodies don't care about that. They just want that quick fix of dopamine. So we continue chasing on this crazy hamster wheel of constantly chasing that activity. Oh, I need to be on my phone. I need to watch porn. I need to play video games. I need to do these drugs. I need to smoke. You need that activity, and you begin to develop a strong craving and addiction for it, no matter what the activity is. But the issue is that the more you go down that rabbit hole of addiction, now you begin to enjoy life less and less and less, because you're spiking your dopamine levels more and more and more, and that just throws off your balance once again. And again, the research shows that it's not bad when you do it just one time or a few times, but when you are constantly spiking your dopamine levels to these extreme heights, that does imbalance your dopamine levels over the long term. And that can cause sadness, a lack of focus, no motivation. And it doesn't matter what the activity is. It can be drugs, it can be social media, it can just be scrolling through your Reddit feed or your Facebook feed or your Instagram feed or your TikTok feed. It doesn't have to be some people stigmatize addiction and make it into this box. Oh, only alcoholics are addicts, or only Only people who are doing drugs are addicts. But the thing is that we are all wired for addiction because dopamine is a very addictive chemical. So it can easily, your addiction can be social media. Your addiction can be reading a book. Your addiction can be pornography. Your addiction can be nicotine. All these different things are addictions, and they all cause the same negative impact on your mental health. So this quote is taken from Andrew Huberman. He's a professor of neurobiology at Stanford University. And the quote says, spiking your dopamine with so many different activities throughout the week causes your baseline to progressively drop. And in this case, it can be very subtle, very, very subtle. It's actually a very sinister part of dopamine. It can often drop in imperceptible ways. But then when it reaches a threshold of low dopamine, you just feel like you can't get pleasure from anything anymore. You just feel like you can't get pleasure from anything anymore. That shows you what happens when your dopamine levels become imbalanced from constant spiking. Again, these are leading scientists at Stanford University and who have written books and who have podcasts and who have done so much research into this field of study. I'm just making it as simplified and in your face as possible so that anyone can consume it to better improve their own lives. So again, to summarize all of that, when you are constantly spiking your dopamine levels with any activity, it can be social media, it can be absolutely anything. When you are constantly spiking your dopamine levels, that destroys your baseline dopamine level, and it causes you to feel unhappy, a lack of focus, and a lack of motivation. And again, practically any activity can lead to this downward spiral, from social media to technology addiction, to fast food, to pornography, to video games, to nicotine, to music, to partying, to reading romance novels, to anything can cause this downward spiral when you constantly use it. Okay? All right, let's move on. So part 3, what is a dopamine detox? AKA how you can fix your hijacked brain. And I call your brain hijacked. I call all of our brains hijacked because what we need to realize is that in this day and age, every company out there is using our brain psychology against us. They understand that dopamine is a very addictive chemical, and they literally do research to find out what things to put on the phones, what to put on social media, how to design certain things to make them most addictive. And our brains were evolved for a much simpler day and age. And we were evolved for a world that was ruled by scarcity. And back then, when we were hunting down boar and, living in very simple tribal societies, having dopamine in place, it caused us to constantly be motivated to continue pursuing things that would keep us alive, to continue pursuing sex and food and positive friendships. It caused us to stay alive back then. So it was a very positive thing. But now, in this day and age, it has been hijacked by these companies to keep us addicted to so many different things. It keeps us addicted to shopping, to gambling, to cell phone use, to social media, to pornography, to video games, to nicotine, to drugs, to partying, to alcohol. It keeps us addicted to so many different things. And these companies are very smart in how they use it because they're making trillions of dollars off of us. Trillions. So it absolutely makes sense that we need to learn how to remove ourselves from this consumerist society, because if we don't, we're going to be pulled and tugged around by these companies. And you don't want to allow someone else's profits to rule your mind and what you choose to do with your focus. And that's how most of us are living. We're choosing to live our lives based off of making profits for these big companies rather than consciously choosing what we want to fill our minds with. Anyways, let's move into it. So, how do you fix constant dopamine spikes? And the answer is with a dopamine detox. And what a dopamine detox is simply a break from the high dopamine inducing activities so that you can give your brain a chance to reset and come back to a healthy baseline level. Because the research has shown that when you take a couple weeks away from all the dopamine high activities, that actually gives your brain a chance to come back to a normal, healthy baseline. And that allows you to enjoy more of everyday life on a more simple level, rather than needing the highs of these substances or these activities to make you happy. And the benefits of a dopamine detox is that you become happier, more motivated, more focused, and you tend to develop a deep sense of groundedness and presence. Because again, when you are constantly distracted by your cell phone, or constantly distracted by video games, or constantly distracted by the need and the desire to smoke a cigarette or to go vape or to get drunk, when you're constantly pulled by these things, that makes it difficult to build deep friendships and to truly focus your brain and to think about the deeper questions in life that you're avoiding, the deeper issues in life that you're avoiding. Because oftentimes we use these substances and these activities in order to just escape from life and to escape from ourselves. Many people feel a sense of, for myself personally, I remember when I was constantly on my cell phone, it wasn't because I wanted to be on my cell phone. That was not the case. That was never the case. It was simply because I didn't want to deal with the sense of emptiness of just sitting in my own head for a bit. I didn't want to deal with the fact that I wasn't being vulnerable and building real friendships in my life. I didn't want to deal with the fact that I wasn't truly pursuing my goals to the deepest, in the deepest sense, how I could in my life. I didn't want to deal with the fact that I just wasn't living my life fully. So I constantly used my phone to escape. And many of us, we don't use our cell phones because we like them. We use them to escape from the world and from ourselves. So when you take that out of the picture through a dopamine detox, that gives you a chance to develop a sense of deep groundedness and presence and purpose in your life. So, what is the suggested protocol for how to do a dopamine detox based on science? So, long story short, it's suggested that you do a dopamine detox for about 30 days and that you cut out all of the extreme dopamine-inducing activities during that time. That could mean social media, that could mean pornography, that could mean video games, that could even mean music. It's a very personal undertaking, and you need to decide on what activities you typically use to escape. Everyone has their own vices. Everyone has their own things that they use to escape from their life's problems. So you need to do some self-reflection and figure out what specifically you need to move past. And again, just to make it very, very clear, the goal here is not to cut out pleasure from your life. It's not. Pleasure is a natural part of life. But the goal is just to choose our sources of pleasure more meaningfully and to choose not to get lost in the video games and the social media and the fast food and the drugs and all of these, for lack of a better word, all of these hedonistic and vain pursuits, and instead to choose how we attain our pleasure very, very purposefully. Maybe you want to build better friendships. Maybe you want to build a deeper sense of presence in the moment. Maybe you want to pursue different goals in life. And when you begin a dopamine detox, that gives you the freedom and the time to do that. It gives you the ability to truly focus and get shit done. All right. So going back to the topic of, is dopamine a bad thing? So there was a study from Shuckett and Brown that took 191 alcoholics who were taken into inpatient treatment. At the start of this study, 42% of them were clinically depressed, and they received absolutely no treatment for depression over the course of this study. But they didn't take any alcohol for 4 weeks. And by the end of that 4-week period, only 6% out of that original 42% were still considered clinically depressed. So this kind of just shows how when you take out whatever the activity is that is allowing you to constantly spike your dopamine levels, that gives your brain a chance to reset. And even if you feel depressed, even if you feel like you're clinically depressed, because these guys, again, they were clinically depressed. They met these standards for clinical depression. But by receiving absolutely no treatment, no drugs, none of that, they simply took out the alcohol. And it's not just about the alcohol. This could be social media. This could be pornography. This could be video games. Because again, they all interact with the same area of our brain. It's not about the substance, like the particular specific substance. It's about the simple fact that you are addicted, whether that's social media, whether that, again, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. And Dr. Anna Lemke, again, the Stanford neuroscientist and the author of Dopamine Nation, she responded to the study. And she said, by depriving ourselves of this high dopamine, high reward substance or behavior, we allow our brains to regenerate its own dopamine. And then we are in a place where we can enjoy other things. Very simple. It's very simple. People try to demonize dopamine detox and say, oh, it's a fad, it's fake, it doesn't exist. It's not. All of the science points to the same exact results, the same exact conclusions, but people just don't want to do the work. They don't want to do the work. It's really that simple. Anyways, let's move on. So, how do you do a dopamine detox? Part 4. So this comes down to a 5-step process. Number 1, you need to decide why you are doing this. Number 2, you need to realize that it is going to suck. It's not going to be fun, especially for the first 10 days. Number 3, you need to define a set of rules. Number 4, you need to decide on a duration of time for the dopamine detox. And number 5, you need to systemize the process so that it can become almost automatic for you. Now, let's go deeper into each of these steps. Number 1, you need to decide why you are doing this. And you need to realize that dopamine detoxing, although it's very powerful, it is not an easy thing. It's not. It's going to suck at different points in time. So if you don't have a strong driving force behind why you are doing this, then you are going to fall flat on your face. You are going to fail. It's going to happen. So you need to sit down and ask yourself, what is the purpose of this? Am I doing this to pursue deeper goals in my life? Am I doing this to build myself up financially? Am I doing this to see better success academically, to build a business? Am I doing this to just have a deeper sense of baseline happiness and enjoyment from life's activities? Am I doing this to build deeper connections? Am I doing this to develop a better sense of focus? Why am I doing this? What is the purpose? You need to become very concrete on why you are doing this, because without that strong driving foundation, it's going to fall apart. You're going to fall flat on your face, because I'm telling you, man, I am telling you, this shit is not easy. It's not. It's absolutely worth it. And it is one of the best things I've done in my life, but it's not easy. It truly isn't. So I encourage you to just sit down for 30 minutes, for an hour, and do some deep self-reflection and just think about what is wrong in your life. What issues do you see in your life that you're just escaping through your cell phone, that you're escaping through alcohol, that you're escaping through video games? How could you improve your life if you truly chose to put effort into doing so? And those can become the reason and the motivation and the foundation behind why you perform dopamine detox in the first place. All right, step 2, you need to embrace the fact that it is going to suck at first. You need to accept that. So Dr. Anna Lemke, again, the Stanford neuroscientist, she said that you are going to feel worse before you feel better. Usually you will feel worse for 2 weeks, but the sun will start to come out in week 3, and by week 4, most people are feeling a whole lot better than they were before they stopped. By week 4, most people are feeling a whole lot better than they were before they stopped doing the activity or the substance. Again, so where does this come from? Like, what is she basing these words on? So again, she's a psychiatrist. She has worked with hundreds of different patients, and she's noticed that when she has patients stop doing activities for a certain amount of time, they feel shitty at first. They feel terrible for the first 10 to 14 days. But after that, it's not like you just stay in that state of things feeling terrible. That's not how it works. You reach a point where your brain has reset its dopamine transmission, and everyday life becomes blissful. Everyday life becomes enjoyable. Everyday life becomes honestly pretty amazing. Because again, since dopamine oversees our pleasure and so many other aspects of our life, but particularly since it oversees our pleasure, when you have a healthy baseline pleasure level, now everything seems enjoyable. And I've seen this in my own life. I have truly seen this in my own life. You know, a couple months back when I was constantly on my cell phone and just constantly distracted, I felt a sense of emptiness in many areas. And I felt like I had to be on my cell phone all the time just to avoid that sense of brain fog and emptiness. And I didn't enjoy being on my phone, but I just couldn't help it. It just felt natural. But when you step away from that and you reach a point of baseline healthy dopamine transmission, now I feel amazing pretty much all the time. Like, I still have problems in life. It's not some magical fix, but I would honestly say that it is better than probably anything else that you can do. It's a very powerful tool for improving your mental health. And again, there have been many different studies that even show that it helps with depression, as you saw a few minutes ago. It fixed depression. It fixed clinical depression in all those alcoholics. Anyways, moving on. Step 3, you need to define a set of rules for this process. And this rule set is going to be based on whatever things you constantly find yourself seeking out. Because again, everyone has their own vices. But some common rules for how to do a dopamine detox is that you have no social media access, no nicotine, no sweets, no drugs, no video games, no porn, no gambling. Those are very common baseline rule sets because those are some of the activities that are commonly spiking our dopamine to these extreme levels. So when you take those out, you naturally are able to focus on more simple activities and come to a more healthy baseline level. Anyways, step 4, you need to decide on a duration of how long you are going to do this. Now, the science shows that 30 days is a good standard for how long you should do a dopamine detox. But I also realized that 30 days is not realistic for everybody in this world. Even for me, I'm living a life that is ruled by freedom. Like, I'm living life on my own terms. But even for me, I still have different obligations in place that make 30 days of dopamine detoxing a bit tough. So with that being said, even doing a simple 1-day dopamine detox can be very powerful. And what that would look like is just doing a 1-day detox. And then after that 1 day, modifying your use behaviors so that you're just not doing the activities as much as you were before. Because even though 30 days is the ideal standard, anything is better than nothing. So if you do 1 day of dopamine detoxing and then transform your life, modify your life habits afterwards to be more healthy and less dopamine spiking, that is absolutely a positive thing. Dr. Anna Lemke, she says that 30 days in my clinical experience is the average amount of time it takes for the brain to reset reward pathways for dopamine transmission. There's also a little bit of science that suggests that it is true. Some imaging studies show that our brain is still in a dopamine deficit state after 2 weeks of not using the substance. So again, she's saying that even after 2 weeks of doing dopamine detoxing and staying away from addictive substances and behaviors, our brain still hasn't completely reset after 2 weeks of doing that. So that's kind of the basis behind why 30 days is the ideal length of time for a dopamine detox. But again, even just a 1 day break is better than nothing. It's such a powerful thing. It really is. Step 5. Now you need to systemize your dopamine detox. And the only way to succeed is to put systems in place to make this almost automatic. You do not want to have to think about dopamine detoxing more than necessary. You want to put different habits in place to make it as simple as possible. You really do. So that might mean that you put habits in place like not sleeping by your phone or using an alarm clock instead of your phone's alarm, deleting certain apps, telling your support system, refusing to use your phone between certain hours of the day. You just want to focus on what specific dopamine inducing activity you're trying to cut out of your life, and then figure out specific habits that would make that process extremely easy. So the ones that I mentioned, they're mainly focused around cutting out your cell phone because that's a very common issue with many people. But if your issue is nicotine, or if your issue is pornography, or if your issue is video games, or if your issue is anything else, you want to spend some time just sitting down and thinking about what specific habits you can put in place to make that process of cutting out of your life very simple and very automatic. And when you do that, when you don't need to think about dopamine detoxing, and when it becomes a natural part of your life, that makes the entire process so much easier. All right. Now, I just want to say this, man. Like, we are all so addicted to so many different things in our lives. But I just want to tell you that life can be absolutely beautiful. Just imagine how beautiful your life could be if you had good mental health, if you had good friends and family and a positive support system around you, if you had a job that you loved, if you had, at the root, if you simply had positive mental health, because that seeps into every other aspect of our life. But so many of us, we are destroying our own mental health. We are destroying our ability to focus, our ability to genuinely connect with others, our ability to be present in this moment, our ability to just enjoy life without having these extreme activities to boost up our emotions. We're destroying our ability to do that because we are constantly on these different devices and doing these different activities that just mess up our dopamine baseline. But when we get past that, life can be so beautiful. And I want to take a moment to talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because this is Maslow's hierarchy. It basically talks about some of the motivating forces behind why we do anything in life. And it basically says that we have different levels of needs in our life. We have our physiological needs, which is like safety, food, well-being, simple stuff like that. And then once we have those taken care of, we can then begin to elevate to higher levels of need, like friendship, esteem, self-actualization, and so on and so forth. And I want to touch on this because we live in a very strange day and age where things have become kind of flipped from how they were in the past. Because in the past, imagine you're living in a tribal society, and you guys are hunting and farming to survive. And in the past, we had, so again, the five levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is physiological needs, safety needs, love and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. And in the past, in those tribal days, we might have struggled with physiological needs because we didn't have food, we didn't have clean water. We had to struggle to find these things. And we might have struggled with safety as well because we had these rival tribes trying to kill us, and bears and lions and poisons and just so many different things that could have killed us at any point in time. So back then, we were simply trying to achieve the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy. But now we kind of have the lower level completely taken care of. Nobody in this modern day and age some people are, but most people in this day and age have their food taken care of. They have water, they have clean air, they have a place to live, they're not in danger. Most people have their basic needs taken care of. So that should have allowed us to move to the higher levels of this pyramid. But the very interesting thing is that in the past, in these tribal societies, although they struggled with safety and physiological needs, the two most basic levels of the pyramid, it can be assumed that they definitely had more love and belonging, and that they certainly had more esteem as well. Because you need to imagine, when you have a tribe of people around you, and that tribe is made out of your closest friends and family, you naturally know your place in this world. You naturally have friendship. You naturally have intimacy. You naturally have a sense of connection. So again, they struggled with safety, they struggled with survival, but they had love and belonging just ingrained into their lives. And it was the same way with esteem. They had respect, they had self-esteem, they had status, they had recognition, because everyone in these tribes, they had their natural place. Someone might be, the village orator, the person who tells the stories. Someone might be the tribal chieftain. Someone might be the one who goes out and collects berries. Someone might take care of the children. Everyone had their specific role within these tribes. And when you have a very clear understanding of your purpose, that kind of brings an innate level of esteem and self-respect. So now, in the modern day, we have moved on to a point where, although we have our food and our water and our safety taken care of, we don't have any of the higher stages of the hierarchy addressed. Many people are lonely. Many people lack intimacy. Many people don't have deep conversations in their life. Many people don't know what their place is in this world. Very few of us would call ourselves self-actualized. So again, we should have the ability to pursue these higher levels of the hierarchy, but we are constantly distracting ourselves through cell phones, through technology, through all these different things. And that causes our growth to be stunted. It keeps us at these lower levels rather than progressing into our best selves. We never have the quiet needed to work on these different things. We never have the sense of quiet and nothingness and emptiness so that we can really focus on building better, more meaningful, more fulfilling lives. We never have that. And again, we try to fill the holes within us by using tech and by using distractions. And we're in a constant state of escape from the world. And more deeper than that, we're in a constant state of escape from ourselves. And I want to encourage you to just spend some time looking inside of yourself and asking yourself, what are you trying to avoid in your life? Is it loneliness? Is it fear of not achieving your dreams? Is it a sense of confusion with the world? What is it that you're trying to avoid? Because again, oftentimes we use these activities to just avoid the deeper issues in life, to avoid the emptiness, to avoid the void. But I encourage you to walk toward those issues, embrace them, because until you spend the time truly sitting down with yourself and looking inside and looking your deepest problems head on and finding ways to move through them and to solve them and to embrace them. Until you do that, you're never going to move forward in your life, because constantly avoiding your problems by having distractions does not make problems better. Most problems, if you just leave problems alone, they tend to get worse, not better. So again, embrace the void, embrace the quiet, embrace the discomfort. And dopamine detox is a powerful tool for doing all of that. Anyways, I hope this video has brought some value to your life and that you can actually begin implementing this in your own life. I have personally seen so many massive improvements in my own life from doing dopamine detoxing. It's helped me with my mental health, with my focus, with my relationships. And at the most important level, what matters most to me is that it has simply allowed me to become more present in the moment. I used to just constantly feel this sense of brain fog, and like I was never fully there in any moment of life. Like I wasn't really myself. Like there was just a gray haze of fogginess just constantly sitting there no matter what I did. I couldn't have deep conversations. I couldn't focus. I couldn't think how I knew I should be able to think. I couldn't do anything. And when you detach yourself from all the distractions, I'm telling you, man, it's so powerful. It is so powerful. Anyways, please realize that life can be absolutely beautiful. And life is beautiful. It really is. But oftentimes the distractions are blocking us from seeing that. Anyways, that is the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace out, y'all. One last thing before you go, folks. If you enjoyed this video, I am absolutely sure that you're going to love the next video as well. You can watch that right now by clicking the link down below. See you there.